Dear listeners, like there is a version of yourself you meet only when you leave everything familiar behind. Not the person that you thought you did become, but the one who emerges when language feels like guesswork and home becomes a negotiation. So it's a quite unraveling, the kind that doesn't announce itself until you are standing in a city that will never fully be yours. Raising a child between walls, learning that belonging is not a place you arrive at, but a conversation you keep having with yourself. So, welcome to Mind Meets Machine. I'm your host, Avik, and this is the podcast where we slow down enough to notice what shapes us. And today, I'm speaking with someone who has lived that conversation across 7 countries and 8 years in Istanbul, someone who turned the complexity of raising a bilingual child into a space where other families could find their rooting. So, please welcome our guest, Jodi Cowles. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Jody, for joining us today. And dear listeners, like before we get into the discussion, I'll quickly love to introduce you with Jody. So she is a co-founder of Blue Hat Publishing and Well Told Studio, and the creator of Joyous World, a community for bilingual children and the parents navigating that beautiful, disorienting terrain. So I do not want to take much of your time. Let's get started. So Jody, like a lot of people kind of, I'd say, romanticize the idea of living abroad, right? I mean, we also think US, we have to go. At US life, I love it. We do, right? So, but this kind of this notion of reinventing yourself in a new place. So, what is the misconception here about the experience that you wish like more people understood before they pack their bags?
I think that people are looking for that. That's a great definition of it. It's their romanticize. We all romanticize the grass is greener, whether it's in a different city or in a different job or across the world. And like you said, a lot of people want to come to the U.S. A lot of people in the U.S. want to go to Europe or just getting out of what's normal and maybe expected. And yeah, you think you can reinvent yourself. And I think most people don't think about 6 months in when you can't communicate still. Like maybe you've been trying really hard to learn the language. A lot of people don't, but maybe you have been and you're trying to get into the culture and you just want a Big Mac or you just want something, whatever it is from your home culture. I think most people move because of that romanticized idea. And they think maybe they're not fleeing, but they do think they're moving to something better. And they don't think past, I don't know if you've ever seen the cultural stress graphs, but cultural adjustment when you move into a different culture. People don't think past the honeymoon phase. But right after the honeymoon phase is the what have I done, crater. And then you sort of crawl back up out of it and adjust. But I lived 8 years, as you mentioned, in Istanbul. Never felt at home completely. I really enjoyed your introduction. That was so true. You can get to a place, you can learn the language, you can be really excellent in trying to have open boundaries and learn the culture and not be real closed off. You can make great friends that are like family, and still you can be just slapped in the face with a cultural difference that really never gets easier. It doesn't mean that you can't adjust, but yeah, sorry, that's a rambling. I'm very passionate about this topic.
I know. I know, I can understand. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, yeah. And that is the reason I mentioned at the beginning, because it's not only about me or, I felt like it's about, most of the countries. Like always, because there was this idea like from 70s, 80s, and then 90s. It was like in a huge time where people used to think like, yes, I have to live the American dream, right? So I want to go there and all. Everyone, and same for the European cultures as well. Day by day, it started. But that is the reason I mentioned about it. But I mean, when you first arrived in Istanbul, so what was a moment that made you realize that this was not going to be the kind of adventure you actually imagined, but something else entirely?
Well, I think my experience is a little bit different from the usual. it was my fourth move in 4 years, and I was working for an international aid organization, so I traveled just a ton. I was in 40 different countries within, a 3-year span and working with a lot of cultures. So I was already a little tired when I got to Istanbul. And I had already had a lot of cultural adjustment and a lot of cultural. I think the interesting thing about culture is it's beautiful. There are so many good things about getting outside of your own micro subculture. Even again, going across the city and engaging with someone who is not like you
Hmm.
in some things is so good for us, but it's also it opens your mind and your worldview, and it makes you a more, I think it can make you a more well-rounded person and all the good things, but it still is slapping you in the face regularly. And I
Hmm.
think that happened for me within the first 2 days of moving to Istanbul, because we had a water leak in our ceiling and
Okay.
no idea how to fix it. No ability to talk to our landlord, because the person who had translated for us had gone out of town the next day. So we didn't know anyone in Istanbul. We didn't know how to communicate with our landlord. And the ceiling is like leaking right in front of us. So it was a very, very quick jolt when most of us are very comfortable and accomplished. That's not quite the right word, but you know how to
Hmm.
manage a maneuver in your own culture. And when you're outside of your culture and outside of your language, it's so disconcerting. I know exactly what to do if I'm here in the States and in my city. Even if I'm in a different city, I know what to do. I know who to call if my ceiling is pouring water. But to not even know who to call or to not be able to communicate with anyone was shocking.
Hmm. So, I mean, I think we carry this idea that transformation happens when we choose it, when really it happens in the gaps between what we expected and what actually kind of unfolds. So there's something honest about naming that dissonance, kind of instead of pretending that it's all the growth and the revelation from day one. So yeah, and so I definitely love to ask you about that everyday part. Like you have created the Joyous World for bilingual families. So in the everyday life, what do you think? What does that actually look like? Raising a child between the languages, and what are the small moments where that complexity shows up in ways like people might not expect?
I'll tell you one story, one issue for us that was extremely painful and complicated. And that was that we adopted our daughter when we were in Turkey, and the process took almost 4 years. That's a whole different story, but our daughter could not leave. She was stateless and didn't have a passport, so she couldn't leave during those years. So our family came to us to visit and friends came to us to visit, which was wonderful. But in the day-to-day life that you're talking about, the people who acted like her grandparents were our closest Turkish friends, which was
Hmm.
beautiful, so beautiful. And also, she had grandparents and she couldn't see them very often. And the relationship she had was with the Turkish grandparents. So opening yourself up to people who you are only going to know for a certain period of time. Maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 3 weeks, maybe it's 20 years. People move for different seasons, but opening yourself up to let people to care about people and to, like you said, to just let things be what they are instead of having your expectations for what it should be or what it needs to look like. There's a lot of beauty, but there's a lot of pain to being far away from your family and the things that you're familiar with, and you're raising your child in a beautiful way with so many positives and so many
Hmm.
opportunities to expand their life, but also not like you were raised. And so there's a dissonance between the two of you. So it's very complicated.
Got it. So, like, how did you and your daughter navigate that? The question of which language holds which part of her.
Well, for us, it was also complicated by COVID. She was birthed to almost 4 years. And right before she turned 1, COVID started. And in Turkey, they managed that by having everybody over 65 and under 16 had to stay in their homes for almost a year. So she had very little social interaction for the second year of her life. So she had started to have Turkish, but after that year, her Turkish was very minimal. So what we did was we put her in a preschool. Once COVID started, the regulations started to go down and things opened up. We put her in a Turkish preschool just to be around other kids, and her Turkish just exploded. And what we tried to do was speak English in our house and Turkish while we were out. A lot of the expats we knew used that model, but I think the age bracket she was in, that worked for us. I'm continually curious how it would have worked if we had been there while she was more of a school age. I know that is challenging.
Got it. And so if I ask you, like, if you have to give one advice to the listeners today who are listening right now, what will you give?
In regards to bilingual children or
Yeah,
living
yeah,
over, okay, I would say
yeah, yeah.
don't give up. It's very
Got it.
hard. I have struggled more since we've been home, in the United States. I've struggled to keep up her Turkish. I've completely failed because we don't have a lot of Turkish around us. And so being surrounded by a monolingual culture and then trying to keep a minority language alive is very difficult. But it has so many benefits if you can just hang on. So I would say don't give up. Just try to keep your heart language alive in your children's lives as they grow up. They're going to probably do the same thing my daughter does, which I try to speak Spanish to her because we worked on Spanish with her after Turkish. And she says to me all the time, "Speak English." She's rejecting the second, the third language. So it's a real struggle to live in a monolingual culture, especially when it's not your own. So my advice would be hang in there, keep trying to keep your heart language as part of your child's story because they will appreciate it.
If listeners wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
They can go to jodicowles.com. I have everything that I'm involved in is linked up there. I've got some social media, I've got some newsletters, but pretty much anybody who wants to find out what I'm doing can go there.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links, details, everything into the show notes for easy reference so that you can easily reach out to her. And I'll say, like, the truest version of yourself is not the one that fits neatly into a single place or language. So, it is the one that learns to live in the spaces between. So, thank you so much, Jodi, for sharing your perspectives and the details. And thank you, everyone, for staying with us. I think what stays with me from this conversation is the idea that identity is not something we protect by staying still. So it's something that we discover by allowing ourselves to be changed again and again without losing the sight of what matters underneath. So if this resonated, dear listeners, just be with it a little longer. Notice where you are translating yourself, where you are holding multiple truths at once. That's not the confusion. That's the depth, I'd say. So until next time, take care of your mind and let it meet the world as it is. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.